Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And good morning to one and all. Phew, I'll tell you. Yeah, I was anxious, to say the least, about the Wisconsin race yesterday. And I just want to point out that unlike these other races, the state Senate race, state races here, where Democrats have won, in one case in Lancaster County for the first time since 1889, and also in contrast to the Florida congressional races yesterday that the Republicans won, albeit seeing their margin of victory more than halved from what it was just in November with Trump on the ballot. The difference is that Wisconsin, that race, is the first, I believe, statewide race. It wasn't a little district, either a congressional district or a state district. It was the entire state, a state that had gone to Donald Trump in November, which isn't that long ago, less than half a year ago. And the Democrat won the state by 10 points. That is how to think of what potentially that Wisconsin victory means. And because it's a state I know, I looked carefully at the counties, every county, and how it had voted. And it's astonishing because counties near where I grew up, which is called the Fox River Valley, Green Bay, and on down the eastern coast of the state on Lake Michigan, the cities of Appleton, where Senator Joe McCarthy came from, also Houdini came from, a marvelous little town 30 miles south of Green Bay. And that's very Republican territory, as is Green Bay. Not the city anymore, but the county. And it went blue. Parts of the Fox River Valley that you never see colored in blue when these electoral maps come out, they were blue. And adding to that increased blueness of the Wisconsin map was the trending lines for how the vote went, where the vote was trending. And in every single county in the state of Wisconsin, the trend favored the Democrats. Every county, rock-ribbed Republican counties that Trump took by 75% or whatever the hell. The Republican vote was down. The Democratic vote was up. I've never seen a map that looks like that in Wisconsin. Every county with arrows pointing blue and up for the Democrats. Just want to say, makes me feel better. I read a post that said something that I appreciated as well. Another contrast, and the poster said this: giving out $1 million checks to bribe white voters in Wisconsin is apparently legal. But giving out food and water to black voters standing in line to vote under the scorching Georgia sun for hours and hours is a crime. Take that in, because it's apparently true. Well, we know it's true. Incredible. Which is to say that, man, we got our work cut out for us. We really do. The another point is that that I wanted to get in is that the turnout in Wisconsin yesterday was, according to one of the nerds who really does election watching, he characterized it as extraordinarily high. So I'll tell you, I when I saw what was going on there and the money that was pouring in, and that even before I knew Elon was doing what he was doing, I did give money to Crawford in that race, the Democrat. And I got a better return on my bucks than Elon on his. Not that it matters. In fact, I suspect my contribution was a lot more of a chunk of my change than his of his. I know that. I mean, my God, $1 million here, there, hundreds of millions here, there for him, nothing. Wouldn't know it. Pocket change. Okay, so thank God for that. Anything that makes Republicans unhappy delights me. So, want to tip my hat to Senator Cory Booker. What he did yesterday and the day before, standing for 25 plus hours to make a point, was impressive as all get out and much appreciated. And the contrast of Cory Booker and our Democratic Senator, John Fetterman, again, starkly stands as an indictment of our senator, who, unlike Cory Booker, does not see these as extraordinary times and is behaving as if they are normal times in which you befriend the opposing side and do book parties with him and vote for the fascists' cabinet people. Mind-boggling. And Cory Booker is no firebrand by nature. He's a very moderate. I think whenever they do little polls about like who's the nicest person in Congress or something, he's up there. Everybody likes him. He's a good soul. Tries to get along, in fact. And for him to feel that it was important to do something like this, it's big. And you do wonder, I am sorry, could any of you stand for 25 plus hours, speaking coherently and not taking a bathroom break? Could you? The physical, just the physical thing that he did is astonishing to me. And then the fact that if you tuned in at any time, he was speaking coherently and speaking on topic. Others who have done long filibusters in the Senate have, read from books, read poetry, anything. But he threw out, and if he read anything, what he read were letters from his constituents, read them into the record. Nothing that wasn't pertinent to the point he was making. And that's impressive. And of course, it's just the cherry on top that by this extraordinary physical act that he did, and Mort is writing, impressively fiery to the very end. It was amazing. And that by doing so, he broke a record. It's not the breaking of the record that's so wondrous. It's who held the record. And that record for the longest filibuster, I'm sure you know, it was held by the noxious racist Strom Thurmond, who did his filibuster with the intent of keeping the Civil Rights Act from coming to a vote. And so it's doubly rich that filibuster record was broken by one of only 14 Black Americans who have held a position as Senator of the United States. Strom Thurmond. So, I mean, just kudos, and I now have a true appreciation for this man. And for those who would say, "Oh, it's just it didn't do anything. There isn't issue. It was just a symbolic." The thing is, what he was saying, everybody literally has to stand up. Nothing is too little. You have to do what you can. He was in a position to do that, and by doing it, draw attention. All of us, in our own way, can stand. And speaking of that, again, the hands-off rallies on Saturday, I mentioned in Pittsburgh, will be on Grant Street. And I have an email that I promised to share, if I can find my email, that I promised to share. And that's from Jan. And she says, please announce that the hands-off demonstration in Butler is at along Pennsylvania 68 West. The address 560 Evans City Road, okay? And that is from 2 to 4 or I don't know if it's to 4. It's at 2 p.m., okay, in Butler, if that's a closer spot for you. Parking available at the Butler Gymnastic Club. I'm just passing that on to you folks in Butler, okay? I do note with some trepidation that the weather forecast for Saturday has rain in it, as it does for the, I think, next 5-6 days. Let us hope that that does not eat in to people's attendance. This is because I've said over and over, these are not normal times, and they require us to not behave normally. If normally bad weather would keep you from attending an event, don't allow it to now. Rain is water. That's all it is. You can dress to protect yourself from getting drenched, and you can stand there. And standing in the pouring rain shows more resolve. So a great turnout in rain will be even more impressive. Don't let it stop you, is all I'm saying. Okay. Something I just want to get out of the way because people have asked me to comment, and I aim to please, but I'm going to disappoint in that I really don't have much to say. And that is, I've been asked to comment on the passing of Pittsburgh radio personality Jim Quinn. I knew Jim Quinn not well. Our paths crossed at WTAE. I believe, I don't know if he was on TAE or the FM station. I think he was just on WTAE, a DJ at the time, where I was beginning my talk career. I had no issues with him at that point in his life. But then he went on to do what he went on to do, which was talk radio as well. And his talk was the kind of talk that I feel has helped propel us to this unhappy moment. And so I was not a fan. I did not respect him. Admittedly, I did not know him, but my sense is that in his professional life, he did lots of damage to the cohesiveness of our country and to sowing the kind of hate and nastiness that is so prevalent now. So I hadn't intended to say anything because of that old saw, to not speak ill of the dead. So I am just giving you my sense of his contribution while he was alive, and I did not think it was a positive impact on us as a community. Incredibly, he I don't know if it's incredible, but he did at one point cross paths and work at the same place as a guy named Jeff Christie, who would later go on to change his name, professional name, to Rush Limbaugh. And Quinn patterned himself, his shtick, after, of course, Limbaugh. And he was hardly alone in that. And they both cross paths at Pittsburgh radio station KQV. Radio is it's a small world. It's unusual not to cross paths if in the same market at some point. People move around. Um, so whatever. Uh, that is all I have to say about Jim Quinn. Oh no. The other thing is when I first started this iteration of my talk, it was at Steel City Media, downtown on Smithfield Street, at the invitation of the CEO of Steel City Media, which owned a number of radio stations and also Pittsburgh City Paper at the time. And he is the one who brought me back in after the station I had been at, WPTT, decided to save money and go to an all syndicated format of right-wing crapola. And so I was out of a job, and he rescued me, and I went over to Steel City Media and to a really very nice studio there. And that studio where Lynn Cullen Live began was the studio that Jim Quinn had used as well while working. I don't know what station he worked at of theirs. I don't think they own B94. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I do know when I was there and somebody said, this is Jim Quinn's studio. And I thought, well, no, it's not. It's my studio. But a small world, the world of radio. So, guys, staying local, if I may, because local gets short shrift these days from me. The mayor of New York has, thanks to Trump, had his corruption case dismissed. A federal judge dismissed the case. Oh, man. Incredible. Corruption. Ellen is also writing us that according to the Hands Off website, there is another event on Saturday from 5 to 6. It says at Shady Avenue and 5th Avenue, which is Mellon Park, right? It's where the Shady and 5th is where the Pittsburgh Arts Center was, that big old yellow melon mansion. That's from 5 to 6. So I don't know if it's pouring rain at noon and lets up at 5. You can go to both. Thank you, though, Ellen, for that. That's good to know. Check out that Hands Off website just to see. And Gigi says, and Washington County will have its event at the county courthouse Saturday from 1 to 3. That's Washington, PA. That's on Main Street, 1 South Main Street. So, as you can see, this is a nationwide event. And you don't want to be, when history is written, to be the person who stayed home. Go. Let us make this. Let us be that small part of growing something bigger to literally save this nation. Okay, I think I got all that stuff in. right? Now, I also want to apologize for the way my voice is sounding. I'm not sure what that's about, but I'm blaming the lung surgery, okay? Because things just are not, I'm sorry, quite right. I mean, they're okay, but they ain't quite right. I don't know if I'll ever be quite right again. What the hell? So I came upon this and I just wanted to share it. So I'm gonna. It was a post on I think Blue Sky. These different. I don't do Twitter anymore, and I won't call it what it's now called. And in its stead, I first joined Threads, which is Meta, Facebook, and then not really wanting to use that as well, I then moved over to Blue Sky. This just in, the Supreme Court upholds the FDA's ban on citrus flavored vapes. All right. Can they get down to something important like can the president act like Caesar? Jesus Christ. Okay, so this is something that I came upon, and it's something that I've spent time worrying about. And God knows there's a lot to worry about, but it was written by a teacher, a high school teacher, who described herself as 46 years old and burned out. And she said she wanted to share some pretty brutal truths. She said that not enough people are talking about from her perch. Um, and she thinks the kids that she's been teaching for the last 10 years are broken, is her word. Broken. Now, this is just one woman's sense of why. And she says it's not bad parenting. She's not blaming parenting, but she is blaming the environment in which they live. And she says any teacher will tell you that they just can't focus like kids used to be able to. They're good at skimming, they're good at swiping, they're good at scrolling, but focusing, well, and again, don't blame them because they have been under assault since they were babies by big, big, big forces working to hijack their attention. They have been, right, the focus of algorithms that reward dopamine production, doesn't reward deep thinking, contemplation, thoughtfulness. And the teacher's saying anyone who spends their days with these kids attempting to get there and keep their attention knows what a leviathan task it now is. And she said, and they lack confidence. Now, high school kids, yeah, I'm just going to use my, I didn't have any confidence, but I wasn't living in an age when uh, you got a sense of confidence from validation of something you posted online. And that's pretty much where they're living now, in that other reality or unreality. And she said, in the past, kids became confident people because of skills they developed and effort they put in and things they accomplished in the real world, not a post that went viral. And now that is where they live, getting likes. Then you feel validated. And then you go for it again, repeat and repeat and repeat. That's the illusion of self-worth. She says they're good at feeling stuff, but they're not good at processing. So this social media flood that they live in fills them with emotions. They see something funny and they laugh and want to share it. They see something sad, they cry, they want to share it. Something meant to enrage them, they get enraged. They see somebody said something on something and they take it to heart, whether it be true or not. And she says what she sees is most of these kids are not able to sit with their own thoughts long enough to understand anything, themselves, the world, whatever. I know this is not happy, but it's been my sense as well. And I'm not saying, look, I know lots of kids in this, I don't know lots in this age group that are bright and able, but we're talking about the bigger picture here. They also, she says, don't know how to resolve conflict. Quite clearly, the adults in the room don't either these days. When they're angry at something or somebody, the way you deal with that is you ghost them, you cancel them, you don't engage. So they don't end up learning as much as we did because we didn't live in this insane world to learn how to navigate the bigger emotions of being alive. We didn't have this ability to escape into an echo chamber that, said everything's okay. She feels that the kids she sees now, they understand what anxiety is and trauma is and depression is, probably better than most generations she has taught. But she said they're also more depressed, more anxious, more emotionally fragile, more traumatized. I mean, these are the kids that grew up with active shooter drills. And it hasn't built resilience, it's built anxiety, understandably. And then she says this, you know, it's TikTok and Instagram now that are teaching them who they are, what to believe, how to think. And by the time we realize it, their worldview has been shaped by influencers and algorithms, not us, not their teachers, often not their parents, not empathetic human beings. And she feels that schools are fighting an unwinnable battle because the culture will not rein this stuff in. And teachers are bearing the brunt of it. They're burning out at a time when we can see that because schools don't have the teachers they need. And she said, and how do you teach kids who've grown up in this culture, which trains them? Stop and think about this, because nothing I'm going to say is incorrect here. A culture that trains them to expect instant results and endless entertainment. So, what made me think of her and having seen what she had written was there was a piece in the New York Times today about Great Britain and other European countries moving to try to protect their young people from this onslaught, algorithmic onslaught, coming from entities and people that don't give a damn about them or their well being. And the only way you can do that is obviously to keep them off their phones, keep them off the internet. And so increasingly, well, Denmark has announced plans to ban smartphones in schools. France has already barred smartphones in elementary schools. Norway is moving toward enforcing a minimum age on social media. Who knows? What the hell are we doing? It is beyond me that anyone would agree that kids having access to their phones while in the classroom is a good idea. I mean, it's beyond me. As a matter of fact, I recall, my God, this has to be a long time ago. When the hell was that? I had gotten friendly with an African immigrant, a Catholic priest, Father John Amankwa from Ghana. And I think it was because he started listening to my radio show, and then we met, and I just he was a good guy and interesting. And anyway, he ended up becoming an American citizen, and I remember, my God, the pride and the joy he felt. And then he ended up leaving Pittsburgh and moved to Cincinnati. I'm blanking, somewhere in Ohio, and he was a teacher at a Catholic college. And he asked me, this has to be 15, 20 years ago. I don't know. He asked me to come and speak to one of his classes. And I said, only for you. Well, I drive whatever it was, 4 or 5 hours. I don't know what it was. It was 3, 4 hours. Um, to do it, I'll do it. So I went. I prepared can't even remember exactly what the class was, but I think it did have to do with, yes, communication and, something I had some sense of. And it was the first time in my life that I stood, and it was in a big lecture hall. I stood on a stage in front of a lectern with a bunch of students scattered throughout and started doing my thing. Now, I have some sense that I can do a live speech pretty well, that I can be entertaining and somebody who, is not going to drone on. I'm a performer. And I was pulling out all the stops for my friend. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing because almost nobody in that class was looking at me. I I had never experienced that, where you're talking to people as a teacher and they're not even looking at you. They all were looking at screens. Now, maybe they were listening. I have no idea. But I, as the speaker looking at them, was getting no feedback from them. Communication is a two-way street, and listening, hearing is an activity. And I was getting no. I was so stunned. And my reaction after the astonishment was anger. I got pissed off. I really felt that it was so extraordinarily rude. And I don't like being disrespected. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but it probably amounted to pretty much, hey, hey, look at me. I don't know what you're looking at, but look at me and listen to me. I got mad. I think Father John was a little freaked. And he was obviously used to this. And that was so long ago that it was probably just beginning. I hadn't seen, and my God. Again, we're not fighting back. Can't believe we're just, I don't know. Anyway, just wanted to say all that. Oh, I said I wanted to go local and then I didn't. I wanted to mention I read with horror that the Pittsburgh metro system, the buses in Pittsburgh, they are talking about cutting a third of their routes. No, routes. I'm trying to remember. When I went to acting school, I was told in speech class that I was mispronouncing that route. When I said route, it should be route. Um, I mean, one's correct and some, they routed the enemy. They didn't root them. I know that. And it's route 66, right? So it's bus routes. Routes. No, it's bus routes. Oh, dear God. Anyway, I was so blown away by this. And most people, I guess, aren't, because most people don't take the bus. But when I was working down there and doing my show out of Jim Quinn's studio, I took the bus. It made the most sense. And it was wonderful. It dropped me off literally on the block. And so I became a bus rider and I really appreciated that. I appreciated it. And I got to see that for so many people, that is their transportation. And they're talking about cutting whole bus routes out, whole communities out. What the hell is someone supposed to do if that is how they get to their job? And I know they're in some kind of public comment stage now, but the reality is again, we as a culture and community no longer think about community. We're not willing to fund stuff that we personally don't get something from. The idiocy of people saying, why should my tax dollars go to schools when I don't have any kids? Anyone who says something like that is, number one, showing themselves to be a selfish person, but two, showing themselves to be an idiot. It is to everybody's benefit, of course, to educate the next generation. Anyway, I worry. Apparently, this is a result of state funding going down. You know, we live in a time where no one's willing to raise taxes on anything because doing so means you're out of a job, right? So every time a new administration comes in, either locally or statewide, and they don't raise your taxes because they want to stay alive, that means that we continue to starve the government of the funds it needs to keep things like buses running so people can get to the grocery store or get to work. This idea that everybody has a car is bull, or we live in an era where what? You can walk to the grocery store and walk places? Some people have that. They're lucky. And usually those kind of neighborhoods are wealthy neighborhoods. Anyway, I'm just saying, I was stunned when I saw that. Just stunned. Um, oh, obit. Sorry. I got me an obituary. I'd never heard of this guy. I'm embarrassed I never heard of him. Hang on while I take a swig. Whoa. Okay, so maybe you've heard of him. Here comes Oleg Gordievsky. Oleg Gordievsky. Ever heard of him? Well, you just have. He lived a life like a movie. I mean, it would be a movie. In fact, I'm shocked it isn't a movie. And it's amazing the lives some people live. And when I read his story, I thought, good God in heaven, how do you end up living a life like that? He was born in Moscow, Soviet Union, in 1938. Okay, so as a young child, he would have endured, World War II. His father was an agent with the secret police. It wasn't the KGB yet, but it would become the KGB. And his father was a absolute committed commie. His mother, on the other hand, she was understandably being married to the KGB commie, was sort of quiet about it, but influenced her son quietly with her sense that the communism that they were living under was really oppressive. But he was a KGB guy's son, and so off he went to the elite Moscow Institute of International Relations, which was essentially a training ground for the KGB. And in fact, he then was a KGB person. And he rose. He rose in those ranks. But like his mom, increasingly seeing, from a very inside perspective, what Soviet communism was, he became very, very disillusioned. Somehow he made his, yes, people suspect, whatever, he got approached by a British intelligence agent. This is a British spy approaching this Soviet Union spy. They're both in Copenhagen. Let's just say this. He continued to work his way up in the KGB to the point where he became the top KGB spy in London. What next to nobody knew, certainly, or he'd be a dead man, was that he was a double agent. So the top KGB guy in London, and this would be in the 70s and 80s, was actually working for our side. Well, what used to be our side. He was working for the Brits. And in his obit, they tell of an instance where in the early 80s, Ronald Reagan is president, Margaret Thatcher is prime minister. This guy is the top Soviet spy in London, albeit a double agent. And the Soviets back in the Kremlin were absolutely convinced that the United States was planning a first strike nuclear attack on them. And this had to do with the bellicosity of Reagan's speech and Thatcher's speech. And they felt that under the guise of a NATO military exercise, that the West intended, literally, to hit Moscow with a nuclear strike. NATO starts carrying out this exercise, which was known as Able Archer 83. And the Soviets and their allies, the Warsaw Pact allies, immediately assumed a wartime footing. Now, if you read about this at the time, historians now looking at it say this was the closest moment the world came to nuclear war since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, what's odd is that we knew about the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were all scared shitless by that. But this is 20 some years later, and we, the people, were clueless. Oleg Gordievsky, the double agent, knows what Moscow's thinking, and he knows they're wrong. And somehow, without totally blowing how he knew, he is the person who is credited historically with getting the Soviets to pull back. He was able somehow to persuade Moscow that there was no attack imminent. And he was able to tell the Brits and the Americans that they were scaring the shit out of the Soviets in a way that was potentially going to set off a conflagration. And as a direct result, Reagan and Thatcher toned down their language and made more limited military exercises. So that was 1983. 1985, he gets called back to Moscow. And they grab him. Somehow they now suspect. And he was given drugs, he was interrogated. Someone had said they thought he was a mole. Or no, yeah. Anyway, somehow he ends up not being killed, but placed on leave because he was smooth enough to somehow stay alive. But he knew his days were numbered. And so something called Operation Pimlico was implemented. And this was an operation that was to happen if he needed to be extracted immediately from the Soviet Union. He managed to shake his KGB tail. He makes his way to the Finnish border. 2 British agents, a man and a woman, along with their baby, are waiting for him in their car, a Ford Sierra. He gets into the trunk. He's wrapped in a foil sheet to confuse heat detectors. When the dogs they encountered at the border crossing grew suspicious, the agents, the woman, began to change the child's diaper and making sure that the odor of this diaper wafted through the car and screwed up the canine's smell. That became the dominant thing they were smelling. And somehow they drove off with him. He was sentenced to death in absentia. And he went on to live up until now, amazingly. How the hell he managed to live is beyond me when the Russians, they kill these guys with no problem. So it turns out that his cover was blown by a guy whose name you might note. It later became obvious that his cover was blown by a CIA officer, Aldrich Ames. If that name doesn't ring a bell, look it up. CIA traitor Aldrich Ames, who was a double agent for the Soviets. And this guy, Gordievsky, was one of the agents Ames exposed, and one of the few who was not killed as a result. Almost a dozen others who Ames exposed were executed. Oleg Gordievsky, the top KGB agent in London until he defected and revealed himself as a long-time double agent for British intelligence. He was 86. Thought pretty amazing life. Okay, that's all I got for you today. That's it. Nothing like a good obit to end things, I'll tell you.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.